The story starts and we see a butler working in a castle. The butler enters Eleanor's room while telling her that he is coming in. But when he enters, Eleanor grabs him and calling the butler Ars, she asks him, where has he been? And Ars reveals to us that he has been reincarnated as a background character in an otome game. And somehow, the Yandere villainess falls head over heels for him. And Ars tells us that Celestial Kingdom is a popular game in Japan, and among the many characters, Eleanor was infamous for committing outrageous misdeeds. And our main character, Arkleo Fort, doesn't appear by name in the main story. In other words, he is just a background character. But Ars isn't bothered by it. He says that when it comes to being reincarnated in an otome game, one generally uses his previous life knowledge to become the strongest. But he hardly has any memories of his previous life. And all he remembers that he lived in a country called Japan. Right now, he has no relatives or family. And he is living a carefree life in the orphanage that took him in. He questions himself why he was reincarnated there. He says that if he were to be a main character, he could have used magic or experienced school life. He stays hopeful that one day he might get an opportunity. He says that if he is just a useless background character, then he would enjoy this world. The scene changes and we see Ars having a sword fight with someone, and he pushes his opponent back. We see that it was a match and that Ars is the winner. The opponent says that he gives up and that Ars is a good swordsman. We see everyone around is cheering for Ars, and they say that Ars has defeated every adult in the village. A kid comes to Ars and says that he's amazing and asks him if someday he could become like him. Though Ars says the kid, of course, but we learn that he trained out of boredom. But Ars thinks that he could not become a knight, and the best he could do is get rid of nearby monsters in the village. But we see someone come up and congratulate Ars, and we learn that he is the director of the orphanage. He says that he is sure Ars will become a fine knight in the future. But Ars says it's impossible for a commoner like him to become a knight. But the director reassures him that someone like him will definitely become a knight, and that he never thought the kid would grow up to be so remarkable. And he asks Ars for a favor, and he takes Ars to a castle. Ars is shocked by it and asks, is he supposed to be there? And that he feels out of place. But the director says there's someone who wants to meet with him. We see the door open and someone excuses himself for being late. The person introduces himself as Adelbert Ansines and says that he's the count who governs that region. Ars, surprised by that, introduces himself. The count asks the director if that was the boy they were talking about. Saying yes, the director says that the boy might have some flaws, but he is an exceptional child. The count tells Ars that he has heard about his achievements and tells him that he has an important favor to ask him. Ars is frightened a bit as the count is talking to him formally. The count asks him if he would become a friend of his daughter. But Ars thinks, why would someone like him go to an orphanage to find a friend for his daughter? The count says that the truth is, his daughter possesses somewhat of a troublesome nature. Ars thinks to himself, what does the count mean by a troublesome nature? But Ars remembers something about the title Ansines. At that moment, the count tells Eleanor to come in. Eleanor then comes in and greets them and introduces herself as Eleanor Ansines, and Ars is just shocked about it. We then learn from Ars that Eleanor is the main villainess, and she sets up curses and so on, and that she relentlessly harasses protagonists out of sheer malice. The count says that he's sure the two of them would be great friends, and tells them to talk for a bit, but they just share awkward small talk. The scene changes and we see Eleanor and Ares walk through the castle garden. Ares says that the garden is beautiful, and that wherever he looks, he never gets bored. But Eleanor says that the garden is maintained regularly. But to Ars, it feels really awkward. Ars remembers before going out, the count said to him that Eleanor is the same age as him. And the count asked, isn't she cute? But Ars thinks that there's no way a child could be that expressionless. But he agrees to the fact that she is really cute. He says that he had never seen such a beautiful girl with black hair and black eyes before. See, my princesses, you don't need to dye your hair or use contact lenses to be beautiful, because you already are a black pearl.
Man, shut your bitch ass up.
But Ars realizes Eleanor isn't beside him and she's standing behind him. He asks her if something is wrong, but Eleanor doesn't say anything. Ars comes near her and says that if she isn't feeling well, should they return to the mansion right away? But Eleanor just says that, as she thought, Ars doesn't want to be friends with her. And Ars is confused by this. But Eleanor says that she understands him and that he doesn't want to be friends with someone accursed like her. Ars tries to deny it, but she says that everyone else also feels the same way. She tells him that it's okay and he doesn't have to hide it. And we see everyone tries to avoid her and say that being near her makes one face misfortune. They call her a cursed child and say that her black hair and black eyes are terrifying. She says some try to carry favor with her because she's a noble's child. But after feeling her magical power, no one comes near her, and they only give her hateful glances. Ars is surprised to hear it, but Eleanor says that she is used to it. And while picking some rose, she says that that's the correct way to react. She puts some magic into the rose, and we see the roses in her hand is withering away. And Ars is surprised to see how powerful her magic is, and thinks to himself that he has never seen power on that level. But Eleanor just tells him to look for himself, and she says that everything she touches loses its color, withers, and die. Plants and people alike. But Ars just calls her name. To which Eleanor says that now he understands that she is a cursed child. Ars thinks that he never knew Eleanor had to endure such treatment and thinks if he could save her and change her fate. He remembers what the Count asked him. He says to himself that he never understood why he was reincarnated there and asks himself if it was because of that. He decides to put the story on track so he could reach the world's happy ending. And to do that, he needs to get close to her so he could avoid the bad ending. And decides that he wants a future where no one is unhappy, including her. So he calls her and says that he doesn't find her appearance creepy or to be feared of, and that she is unbelievably beautiful. And Eleanor is flattered by this. She says that she appreciates him for being so kind to her, but her power could end up hurting someone. He says that he can't completely deny that possibility. Aris says that even if she ends up hurting someone, he'll find a way to handle it, but says that there must be a better way to use that power. He reaches his hands out to the dying roses and says, bloom. And suddenly, the dying rose started blooming again. And Eleanor is extremely surprised by it. And he asks her to be her friend. The scene changes and we see Eleanor remember how mean things others called her. And we see that she is in an endless spiral of darkness. Suddenly, she notices something. And we see it's a shadowy figure. But Eleanor calls it out, saying mother. She says that she is scared, but her mother doesn't turn to her. So she calls her mother again. And when her mother turns to her, we see that her mother's face is full of hatred. Her mother tells her to stop and to not look at her with those eyes. Eleanor is hurt by it, and she tries to tell something. But her mother fades away before she could say anything. Eleanor starts crying and she continuously says she's sorry and that she's sorry for ever being born. Suddenly, someone calls her and we see that she was actually dreaming this whole time. And when she wakes up, she sees that Ars was calling her. Ars asks her if she is okay and says that she seemed to be having a terrible nightmare. Eleanor is confused by it and she realizes they are in her room. Ars explains to her that they were talking in her room and she fell asleep from exhaustion and says that that might be the reason why she had a bad dream. But Eleanor doesn't respond, so Aris calls her. He sees that Eleanor's eyes are full of tears and he is shocked by it. Eleanor starts crying and Ars is unable to think what to do. So when she was crying, he comes up to her and hugs her and starts petting her. And Eleanor calms down a bit and she remembers that Ars asked her to be her friend. And we go back to the moment when they were in the garden, where Eleanor tells Aris that if he is with someone like her, he'll be unhappy. But Aris replies that that's not true at all, and being with her will make him happy, and being with her will make him happy. But Eleanor says that she might end up hurting him, to which Aris says that no one goes through life without hurting someone. Eleanor grabs and squeezes her dress while saying that he would be better off with someone other than her. But Ars grabs her by her shoulder and says that he only wants to be hers. Bro, chill out a bit. You're only 7. Eleanor gets really happy hearing that and says then they should get along. We come back to the present where Eleanor is still in the bed and Aris is sitting beside her. Eleanor tells sorry to Aris To which he tells her not to apologize and that his chest is always available for her. Cheeky little bastard.
Hey, shut the fuck up! Shut your ass up! Fuck you!
Eleanor laughs and says that he is really kind, but Ars tells her that he's just doing what a friend would do. Hearing this, Eleanor gets a bit down and says that she never had anyone to call ally, let alone a friend, and asks him if she could ever measure up to being a friend like him. But Ars says that it's fine and that friendship takes many forms and that he's just doing what feels right to him. And if she wants to make more friends, she'll naturally figure it out. And it tells her that communication requires practice and repetition. While looking like a priest, Eleanor gets dumbfounded by his act and starts laughing. Aris tells her to take things easily and that life is much longer than they realize. We see a week has passed since then and Aris looks a bit worried. And we see Eleanor is doing a lot of things with Aris, like showing him how she bloomed flower with her magic, having tea parties with him, and even seeing stars with him. And we see Aris is having a hard time swallowing such a big transformation. While Eleanor keeps calling him, getting no response, Eleanor gets angry and grabbing him, she asks him if he is listening. But to Aris, she is really cute and he's happy with it. Aris then apologizes to her, saying that he was lost in his thoughts, and Eleanor visibly gets angry hearing that. And she asks him if there's anything more important than her question. Aris quickly tells her no, and grabbing her hand, he tells her that to him, there's nothing more important than her. Eleanor really gets flustered hearing this. And Aris, in his internal monologue, says that, to believe it or not, he, or at least Aris Leoford, is really handsome. And the flustered Eleanor quickly changes the topic and asks him what type of clothes he would like her to wear. And while he's thinking about it, someone excuses themselves. We see it's the Count, and he asks Aris if he could have a moment with him. And Eleanor is quite bothered by it. And the Count tells her to forgive him and that he'll be needing Aris for a bit. While leaving, Aris realizes Eleanor is really angry. And the moody Eleanor says that it doesn't matter to her and that Aris has been absent-minded for a while. Aris realizes he needs to do something, so he goes towards her and leans his head and he tells her that she would look beautiful on anything she wears. And Eleanor is both flustered and happy hearing this. He then leaves with the Count and the scene shifts to the Count's office room and the Count tells Aris the request he made earlier has been approved and Aris seems to be really happy about it. And the Count tells him that starting from next week, he'll be a part of Ansina's household while giving him some clothes. And Aris thanks him, but the Count asks him if he is really okay with that. To which Aris replies him, it saves him from the trouble of commuting. And he is also grateful to have a job. But the Count tells him that he could have at least provided him a place to stay. But Aris says that he doesn't want to exploit the Count's authority. To which the Count says that to hear something like that from a 7-year-old is truly admirable. But Ares replies that he chose him to become Eleanor's friend because of that. But the Count is surprised to see that he understands that much. Ares says that he'll do his best, but before that, he wants to do something. The scene changes and Ares peeks through the door to see that Eleanor is really angry. So he knocks and enters the room. Eleanor instantly starts shouting at him, saying that he's late. She asks if talking with her father was really that fun while she was waiting and worrying, but Ares apologizes to her, calling her my lady, while wearing a butler's suit. And kneeling in front of her while taking her hand, he says that from that day forward, he shall serve as her attendant.